So when the Doors update launched, two towers ended up getting changed dramatically, and those two towers would have been Beebo and Chef. Now it says right here in the update log that all it is minus damage minus range for Beebo and plus range minus cost for Chef, but I want to go into complete depth on where that puts them in the current realm of towers that we have right now, and do these new changes happen to affect the current meta in any way. With all that being said, let's begin the video, shall we? Shameless plug warning. Did you know only 12% of y'all are actually subscribed to this channel? We've made it past that 10% mark, which is good, but I know y'all can do much better than that. So why not subscribe? It's free, you can always change your mind later, and you're already coming back for the videos anyway. Might as well just hit the button just to keep alert whenever I upload. But without further ado, here's the rest of the video. Enjoy. Alright, so the first tower we're going to be looking at, obviously, it's going to be Beebo. Now, this update, they did something I was hoping that would never happen, and they pretty much killed him. The nerfs he ended up getting just, on paper, they don't seem that much, but when I start showing you the testing and what he used to be, y'all are going to be pretty upset about this too, even you new players. So outside of the cost nerfs, which are minimal at best, they really don't mean anything, especially in this game. What I want you guys to really look at is the level 4 and level 5 range decrease. Going from 11 to 8.4 at level 4 and going from 14 to 11 at level 5. To put that in perspective, we're going to go ahead and put down a Beebo at level 4 right here, okay? You see the range now, 8.4, looks very small, right? Let's put down the Balloon Pal and get him to level 4. Now, even though it's slightly higher than 11, this is basically what his range used to look like. You see this? You see how big this sphere is? There you go. That's your range. That's your new range. Just immediately killed. Now, let's not jump to the conclusions yet, okay? Because obviously, we still gotta test this guy out on what he was meant for, which was, he was known as a boss killer. For essentially almost 2 years now, up until when the Doors update came out, Beebo was incredibly dominant for the fact that he could do the most amount of damage to bosses while still being a very, very cheap price. The only other range tower to really outclass Beebo in boss damage was Quinn, but I mean, when you look at these costs for Quinn, you can understand why Beebo was immediately a more favorable pick. Like, look at this. 900, 2,000, 3,200, 5,500. Quinn, once again, 1,350, 3,600, 5,600, and 700. And you immediately notice a glaring flaw with Quinn is the fact that its rate is incredibly low. This is not a Quinn review, but I'm just saying, with a rate of 2.4 seconds and Beebo's rate of 0.5 seconds at level 5, he was able to handle swarms a lot better than Quinn while still being a very cheap price. He was a really good boss killer. Now, the big issue revolves around his little spawn beacon, as I'm gonna call it. Back in the day, you were able to use a Balloon Pal to allow his range to look something like this, where he would basically have his range go in the spawn beacon. Any enemy near this beacon would essentially have a 100% uptime of getting damaged by Beebo at all times until they left this little area here, and Balloon Pal enhanced it. Now, with this gone, Beebo doesn't even touch the beacon anymore. In fact, he struggles to touch the little circle around it. But hey, let's test this guy, alright? And to put it up to the test, we're going to test him against the other meta options for towers right now in the range department. Starting with everyone's favorite, Scientist, alright? This character's been meta for almost 3 years now, literally since this came out. And you'll immediately see why. So to test it, we're just going to put down a singular Balloon Pal and make sure the range does not cross this line over here. That's why they're further back. And what we are going to do is we're going to get my favorite punching bag of a boss, the Blast Tech Brawler test. This is just a boss with 1 million HP, and he doesn't stun, and he has like a above average speed overall. He's not meant to die. This is just to get numbers. That's it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to fast forward through the videos just so you guys can see that the results aren't rigged or anything and in anyone's favor whatsoever. So without further ado, here you go. So, as you can see right here, the number ultimately ended up being 983,018. So don't worry, I'm going to keep that number in mind for all you guys, so none of you have to remember it. Don't worry, I'm going to keep this number in mind, so that way none of you guys have to remember it. Now, we are going to test Branch, the opposite counterpart of Scientist. Now, based on previous testing in the past, these two should be very, very close in terms of boss damage. And we're going to go ahead and put that to the test right now. So as you can see here, Branch ended up with 984,061, so only a 1,000 difference. But the drawback is the fact that Branch, well, not only is his range a lot lower, but he has splash damage, so pretty much just makes him more for groups instead of bosses. But overall, yeah, their damage is practically the exact same. Now, let's do something a little bit more fun before we get into Beebo. We're actually going to do Quinn now. So when we end up using Quinn, we are not going to activate the Spore Field, since it really wouldn't be fair at all. But you'll see that, well, we really don't need to. Quinn will just outclass both Branch and Scientist immediately. And here's proof of that. So as you can see, we're right towards the end now, and I'm gonna have to be really quick on this number. So the final number is going to be 975,820. So to put that in perspective, that is 8,000 more damage than Scientist and 9,000 damage more than Branch. Now for the moment y'all have been waiting for. We're going to be testing out Beebo now, and y'all are going to get to see the fall from grace that this man had. So now, without further ado, let's see how badly they killed my boy. As you can see, they're coming in for their final swoop in to see if they can get a little bit more damage off. And that should be it for damage, but we're going to wait on them to come around one more time to see if they do any more damage. Nope, that's it. So this is by far the lowest number at 986,770. It did almost 3,000 worse than Branch and almost 4,000 worse than Scientist. Well, there you have it. There's your proof that this nerf to Beebo was absolutely terrible. If you would like to know what the ideal damage was supposed to be for Beebo before he was nerfed, it would have been around 981,000. And I have proof from one of my old videos that I tested roughly 2 years ago, and Beebo since then has received nothing but cost nerfs since then. And as you can see from the testing, it was around 981,000. So this leaves me to a new question. What is the purpose of Beebo? His old purpose was, well, he was able to fly around and technically have some of the highest range in the game, but they killed his range. And even if he wanted to have the highest range in the game, Scientist exists, and not only that, but Scientist doesn't fly around in a circle and miss the enemies half the time. It's gonna constantly attack the enemies. Okay, well, maybe Beebo, you know, it's because he has a high rate of fire and higher damage. Well, that's where you're wrong too, because, well, Branch has a higher rate of fire with splash damage. So not only does Branch have AoE with a better rate, but he just instantly clears Beebo when it comes to taking care of very small and trash enemies. So when Beebo ultimately ends up getting swarmed, it just won't work as well compared to someone like Branch. And this tower, by the way, Beebo here, cost almost the exact same as 5 Scientists or 6 Branches. So, in reality, what really is the purpose of this tower? Well, I only have one thought, and it's basically to give new players just a free tower. That's it. This is a tower you would see in like a goodie bag or something. And the reason why is because the only way to get this tower is just beating Naughty's Resort on easy mode. A map you can beat when you're level 1. It is incredibly easy to beat. This is why they nerfed him this bad this update. The devs knew that there was going to be an influx of players with this update, so they had to act quickly to make sure Beebo would not outperform all the other ranged options in the early game, and thus leave room for actual, like, different towers to strive. Even if they're not ranged towers, it would allow newer players' loadouts to look a lot more diverse and not just look like a setup you would find on someone's YouTube channel. But yeah, those are my thoughts about Beebo. Honestly, immediately like an F tier tower, just terrible. There's no reason to run them, but we might as well. Let's just go move on to Chef already. This is actually depressing. I need to end this on a high note. Alright, it's time to test Chef out. So, Chef ended up being buffed this update, and I think it's best to say that this was a much needed buff. You see, up until now, for the past over 2 years as well, Chef has not been in the meta once. Way back in the day, instead of having the hammer that he does now, he used to have a big kitchen knife, and this allowed him to attack incredibly fast. And if you want to know the exact stats, instead of 1.5 seconds rate, it was 0.1 seconds, and instead of 230 damage, it was 30. Now, ironically enough, as bad as those stats seemed, they were better than the Chef we have now, and were entirely broken. He was the most broken tower during like the first year the game came out. So the devs tried to indirectly nerf him by introducing more and more stuns into the game to hinder him specifically. And then they ultimately just settled on giving him the hammer and made a new melee tower with a sword, because why not? So if we look at what happened to Chef this update, you'll notice that pretty much across the board, his entire range was buffed and his level 5 price went down slightly. Now, this is the old level 5 price like it used to be before Chef was reworked into what he is now. And this range buff, as you'll see here in a second, is very, very good. So first things first, we're actually going to go ahead and test Chef with, once again, our favorite boss, the punching bag himself. And let's see if he can actually do some meaningful damage. So as you see from the testing here, Chef ended up doing 969,640. So pretty much roughly 31,000 damage by himself. So overall, not bad, really good. And I mean, you can see how big his range is now. That is that's just disgusting. That's insane. Now let's compare this to his counterpart, Yasuke. Yasuke's greatest strength is the fact that Yasuke can attack quickly. Chef cannot. So we are actually going to test out Yasuke, but we are going to do so without the ability first to give you guys a basic understanding. So let's see how well Yasuke does. So this number, 977,786. So noticeably a lot less than what Chef was, about 8,000 less to be exact. Now, we need to test with the Yasuke ability now. If you don't know what this ability does, well, pretty much dramatically increases their stats, and it gives them a damage over time effect, and it prevents them from being stunned. So, why not? Let's go ahead and see what happens when we use the ability with Yasuke. So from the testing here, we can pretty much confirm that, yeah, Yasuke just destroyed Chef's damage by about 8,000 as well. So, you know, really good, really good. We're going to go ahead and say the final number, once we actually end up seeing it, 961,332. So yes, over 8,000 more damage than Chef. Really good. Now, there's something we need to test. And this test is going to involve our little computer guy, Bite. What this guy does is he actually ends up stunning any kind of enemy that he ends up hitting, including bosses. So, for testing reasons, we're only going to be using a level 5 Bite for this. We're going to see how well Chef does with this, and how well Yasuke does with this. Since we are using Bite, the Chef and Yasuke formations are going to change a little bit. There's going to be 4 in the back in this weird little square, and then 2 in the front. So we're going to put Bite a little bit farther back because we want the stun ideally to be in the exact center so all of the melee troops can hit the boss at the same time. Let's check these numbers and see how well they do. So as you can see there, that added actually another 8,000 damage from that one stun, giving us a number of 962,510. Now for this next test, we're just going to be testing Yasuke with the ability this time. So that way, basically, we can see what the maximum potential of a melee tower actually is. So now that the abilities are finally charged, here is the last damage test for the entire video. Please enjoy. So right there at the end, he is at 953,000 health, which is actually 9,000 damage better. Actually, no, he's gonna get to 950. Okay, never mind. 952,000 health, and now that is approximately almost 10,000 damage better. It is 200 damage off of doing almost 10,000 damage more than Chef. Really, really, really good. So, what do we learn from our observations there? Well, we did learn that while Chef is very good, Yasuke simply just comes out on top when it comes down to the ability. Now, that doesn't mean Chef is necessarily bad, but I have not shown the one weakness Chef has. And that one weakness is enemies that can stun him. You see, when Yasuke has their ability procced, they are actually unable to be stunned while this ability is up. But Chef has no way to defend himself against any kinds of stuns, especially those from bosses. And necessarily, it doesn't really have to be a boss. It can be something like this Halloween jack-o'-lantern. What these guys do is, well, they explode. And when they explode, they stun everything around them. As you can see, the chefs are now proceeding to immediately get stunned. Some of the people are going through. Oh, he's almost there. Yeah, no, they're stunned. So, let's say we wanted to put in, I don't know, let's spawn in a couple of evil ones. So, these guys are a lot more tanky. You know, let's see what the real situation with Chef would be like. As you can see, when one activates their stun, all of them proceed to get stunned, and they are pretty much stuck there. And when the other one explodes, they're still stunned. Now, this is pretty much the accurate representation of what happens to Chef when he gets stunned by a boss. Now, while it's not quite to this extreme of a measure, especially in a normal match, you're not going to find like 20 evil jack-o'-lanterns in the match that are just constantly stunning everything. But it's the idea that counts. When you understand the weakness of this tower, you learn on where this tower is viable. Chef ultimately is a cheaper option than Yasuke, but it's still very reliable because of its range and very high damage in the early game. Yasuke is much, much better for any kind of boss that happens to stun, and when you have the mana necessary to activate its ability. And that is why Yasuke is generally just straight up still better than Chef, even after this massive buff. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Hope you all enjoyed, and I guess I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.